History remembers ancient golden ages as times of peace, innovation, and greatness. But what if that picture is incomplete? What if behind the wealth, the monuments, and the progress, there was a hidden cost few people ever talk about? Welcome to Decoding History and Science. Today, we're not here to glorify the past, we're here to understand it. Because every golden age shines on the surface, but often hides uncomfortable truths beneath. Stay until the end, because this story may completely change how you see one of history's most celebrated eras. Chapter 1: The Golden Age. Everyone celebrates when historians talk about the past. They often divide time into simple labels: Dark Ages, Classical Periods, and Golden Ages. And among these, the Golden Age always sounds the most appealing. It suggests a moment when humanity reached its best version, a time when society seemed balanced, when creativity flourished, when order replaced chaos, and when progress felt unstoppable. These are the eras we are encouraged to admire without hesitation, the civilizations held up as role models for the future. The examples used to prove that human greatness is possible. From childhood, we hear about their achievements, their towering cities, their advanced engineering, their philosophical ideas, their legal systems, their cultural influence. We're told these societies were ahead of their time, that they solved problems other civilizations struggled with, that they created stability in an unstable world. And when we see what remains today, it's easy to believe that story. Stone structures that survived thousands of years, artworks that still inspire awe, writings that feel surprisingly modern. Everything about them feels intentional, organized, refined, successful, so we label them golden. But labels can be misleading, because a golden age is rarely a single shared experience. It's a summary, a highlight reel, a version of history that focuses on outcomes rather than conditions. When we celebrate these eras, we usually focus on what was visible: public achievements, grand projects, powerful leaders, major victories. But history is not only shaped by what is visible, it is shaped by daily life, by routine, by labor, by obedience, by silence. And those details often disappear over time, because they are harder to romanticize. A golden age often looks peaceful from a distance. But peace does not mean equality. Stability does not mean fairness. And order does not mean freedom for everyone. Behind every organized society is a system. And every system demands something in return. Rules must be followed. Roles must be accepted. And not everyone gets to choose their place within it. Some people rise during a golden age. Others simply endure it, while elites debate philosophy and policy. Someone else is producing food, building infrastructure, maintaining order, and supporting the structure that allows greatness to exist. But those lives rarely appear in heroic stories, because hero stories focus upward, not outward, not downward. And over time, admiration replaces analysis. We repeat the successes, we memorize the dates, we praise the innovation, but we don't always ask how sustainable it was, or how inclusive it truly became. A golden age often requires discipline. Discipline requires control. And control, even when subtle, shapes behavior. Traditions define what is acceptable. Laws define what is allowed. And culture defines what is questioned or not questioned at all. In many golden ages, conformity is rewarded, stability is protected, and disruption is discouraged. Because disruption threatens order, and order is what makes the age appear golden. This doesn't mean these civilizations were cruel or evil. It means they were complex. They were human. They balanced progress with pressure, innovation with limitation, success with sacrifice. But those sacrifices are rarely highlighted, because success is easier to remember than cost, and comfort prefers flattering stories. Over generations, the narrative becomes refined. The flaws are softened. The contradictions are minimized, and the Golden Age becomes an ideal rather than a reality. A symbol instead of a system. A legend instead of lived experience. But legends don't show the full picture. They show what survived, not what struggled, not what disappeared, not what was forced to adapt or remain silent. So when we admire an ancient Golden Age today, we are often admiring the end result, not the tension that held it together, not the compromises that maintained it, not the people who carried its weight quietly. And that's why it's important to slow down here. Before moving forward, before celebrating further, before assuming greatness was universal. Because once we look beyond the shine, once we examine the structure beneath the surface, the idea of a golden age becomes far more complicated, more human, and more revealing. And in the next chapter, we'll explore the progress that made this era legendary, and why that same progress demanded a price history rarely discusses. Chapter 2. Progress that changed the world. Every ancient golden age is remembered not for its intentions, but for its visible results. Progress becomes the evidence, the proof that this era was exceptional, the justification for calling it golden. Cities expanded rapidly, not only in size, but in structure, organization, and ambition, transforming scattered communities into powerful urban centers. Streets were planned, districts were defined, spaces were assigned purpose, creating a sense of order that earlier societies rarely achieved. Trade routes stretched farther than ever before, linking distant regions through land and sea, allowing goods, ideas, and cultures to circulate continuously. Materials that once seemed rare became accessible. Knowledge that was once local became shared. For the first time, civilizations felt part of something larger than themselves. Architecture evolved beyond survival and into symbolism, as buildings were designed to communicate stability, intelligence, and permanence to everyone who saw them. These structures were not just functional. They were statements, messages carved into stone declaring that this civilization had arrived. Engineering advanced in ways that reshaped daily life, from irrigation systems that controlled water to tools that increased productivity, to techniques that allowed cities to support massive populations. Agriculture became more efficient, producing surplus food that freed some people from farming and allowed specialization to emerge. Specialization led to innovation. Innovation led to growth. And growth reinforced the belief that progress was endless. Writing systems became more refined and widespread. Recording laws, trade, religious beliefs, and historical events with increasing precision. This allowed societies to function consistently across generations. Rules no longer relied on memory alone. Authority no longer depended only on presence. Power could now be preserved on tablets, scrolls, and stone. Governments grew more complex as populations expanded, creating administrative systems capable of managing resources, labor, and behavior on a massive scale. Taxes were standardized. Duties were assigned. Roles became defined and reinforced over time. For many citizens, this brought a sense of predictability that felt comforting. Life followed recognizable patterns. The system worked, and when a system works, it earns trust. But progress at this level is never neutral. It demands coordination. It demands efficiency, and efficiency demands compliance. Every road that connected distant regions had to be constructed, monitored, and maintained continuously. Every monument required enormous planning, raw materials, and sustained human effort over years or even decades. Every technological breakthrough depended on layers of labor that remained invisible once the final result was complete. As progress accelerated, society became increasingly dependent on its systems to function smoothly. And as dependence grew, flexibility shrank. People were no longer just members of a community. They were components of a larger mechanism. Birth often determined opportunity. Class defined expectation, and deviation became risky. Those at the top of society focused on vision, leadership, and innovation, shaping the direction of progress. Those below ensured that progress never stopped, even when the burden grew heavier. The achievements of the Golden Age were genuine and transformative, but they were not experienced equally. Advanced tools increased output, but also raised demands. Larger cities created opportunity, but also intensified competition and control. Better organization brought stability, but reduced personal autonomy for many. Progress solved visible problems while quietly creating structural pressure beneath the surface. As wealth accumulated, it concentrated. As systems expanded, they hardened. And as success continued, questioning the system became increasingly difficult, because success creates legitimacy, and legitimacy resists disruption. From the outside, everything appeared prosperous. Trade thrived, infrastructure held strong. Culture flourished in art, philosophy, and ritual. The results seemed to justify every decision that led there. And so progress became self-defending. It did not ask whether the cost was acceptable. It only asked how to continue. Innovation became not just a strength, but a necessity. The civilization could no longer slow down without risking instability. And the people within it had fewer opportunities to step outside its structure. Traditions reinforced order, laws protected systems, and prosperity became the strongest argument against change. This is the hidden tension inside every ancient Golden Age. The same progress that elevates a civilization also locks it into a rigid path. The more impressive the achievements, the harder it becomes to challenge the foundation beneath them. Because questioning progress feels like threatening success, and threatening success feels like threatening survival itself. So the system moves forward. Efficient, organized, relentless, even as pressure builds quietly below the surface. That pressure rarely appears in records celebrating achievement. It exists in daily routines, in expectations placed on ordinary lives, in roles that must be fulfilled so the system can continue to shine. From a distance, history remembers progress as triumph. But from within, progress often feels like obligation. And that unspoken difference is where the true story begins to change. And in the next chapter, we will finally focus on the people who made this progress possible, and why history rarely tells their story. Chapter 3. The people history forgot. Every Golden Age is remembered for its monuments, achievements, and visionary leaders. But history rarely tells the story of the people who actually made those achievements possible. The farmers who rose before sunrise, tending fields that would feed entire cities. The artisans whose hands transformed raw stone, clay, and metal into objects of beauty, function, and cultural significance. The builders and laborers who carried, carved, and assembled massive structures that would endure for thousands of years. Their lives were constant, repetitive, and often exhausting. And yet, they were invisible in the eyes of the chroniclers who recorded the Golden Age. While kings, emperors, and rulers were praised, these individuals remained nameless. Every innovation, trade route, irrigation system, and law depended entirely on their labor. Without them, there would have been no towering monuments, no flourishing cities, and no organized society. But these efforts were rarely acknowledged. They were expected. And when expectation becomes invisible, human cost is ignored. People labored under extreme conditions, often for little more than survival. Workdays could stretch from sunrise to sunset, 6 or 7 days a week. Seasons dictated toil, and nature often punished mistakes with famine, disease, or collapse of the harvest. Children joined the effort from an early age, carrying tools, water, and supplies. Adults bore the heaviest burdens, lifting stones, mixing mortars, or tending flocks in fields to sustain the population. The elderly, instead of resting, guided younger generations, passing knowledge and maintaining continuity. Every stone laid, every canal dug, every market constructed was the product of coordinated, tireless human effort. Yet none of this made it into the histories we celebrate. The spotlight of remembrance always shone upward, toward leaders, scholars, and artists. Those at the bottom, whose efforts held the system together, remained in shadow. But invisibility does not equal insignificance. The brilliance of the Golden Age rested entirely on their shoulders. Every law enforced, every trade route maintained, every city kept alive was because of them. Without their work, progress would have been impossible. And yet, their lives were constrained by birth, social class, and circumstance. Mobility was rare, choices were limited, and questioning authority could be dangerous. Some had relative privilege within their station, but most endured hardships silently, without recognition or reward. This is the paradox of progress. The more advanced a civilization becomes, the more it depends on those whose labor is least visible. The success of rulers and elites relied entirely on the persistence and endurance of ordinary people. Even rebellion or resistance was often erased from the record. Voices that challenged authority, even subtly, were silenced or forgotten. Because stability depended not only on achievement, but on obedience and conformity. And when achievement is celebrated, inconvenience is often omitted. Yet, their lives were far from meaningless. They maintained infrastructure, built monuments, cultivated land, and produced the resources that enabled civilization to function. They were the backbone of every golden age. Every triumph depended on their labor. Every discovery required their support. Every cultural masterpiece existed because ordinary hands made it possible. Even when society celebrated brilliance, it did so on the backs of countless people whose stories were never recorded. Archaeology and anthropology have begun to reveal glimpses of these forgotten lives. Footprints in soil, tools, remnants of dwellings, and household items tell us stories that history books left out. We begin to understand that even in the most celebrated civilizations, survival, endurance, and continuous effort were just as important as innovation and leadership. Greatness was never the achievement of a few. It was the collective effort of thousands, sometimes millions. And yet, this realization also highlights the unequal distribution of reward, recognition, and freedom. While elites enjoyed privileges, luxury, and security, the majority often labored in relentless routine. Families spent entire lifetimes supporting the systems that allowed the powerful to flourish. Progress and innovation, while remarkable, demanded obedience, endurance, and sacrifice from ordinary people. And those sacrifices were rarely recognized, recorded, or rewarded. Even those who resisted the system, those who sought justice or fairness, were often removed from official accounts. Their struggles existed in the shadows of triumph. Yet the Golden Age could not have existed without them. Their resilience and labor made extraordinary accomplishments possible. Without them, every monument, every canal, every road, and every market would have crumbled. Without them, discoveries and innovations would have remained impossible. And the culture we admire, the art and architecture we celebrate, would never have existed. Their efforts were quiet, continuous, and enduring. And the more we study history, the more we see that the true story of a golden age is inseparable from the lives of those who built it. Admiration for achievement must always be tempered by awareness of human cost. Because the brilliance of history is inseparable from the shadows it casts. And when we finally recognize the lives of these people, we gain a deeper, more authentic understanding of what a golden age truly was. It was never golden for everyone. It was brilliance, built on endurance, creativity, and sacrifice. It was triumph shaped by toil, resilience, and invisible effort. It was humanity at its most capable, and at its most unequal. And as we continue exploring the dark secrets of these ancient golden ages, we must carry their stories with us, because without the people history forgot, there would be no history worth celebrating. In the next chapter, we'll uncover how wealth and power were concentrated in the hands of a few, and how this concentration shaped the very system that demanded so much from the ordinary people we've just met. Chapter 4. Wealth built on unequal power. Every golden age has its triumphs. But behind those triumphs lies a truth rarely told. a truth about who controlled wealth, who benefited from progress, and who remained unseen. In every advanced society, power and wealth are rarely distributed evenly. A small elite often holds the majority of resources, influence, and decision-making. Kings, emperors, high-ranking officials, and merchants control not only the economy, but the narrative of history itself. They design the systems, set the rules, and determine which stories are told. Meanwhile, the majority contribute tirelessly to maintain the civilization, yet rarely see rewards proportionate to their labor. The more the Golden Age achieves, the more visible the elite becomes, and the more invisible the ordinary people remain. Trade networks, marketplaces, and commerce generate enormous wealth, but most of it accumulates at the top. Merchants profit from goods produced by farmers and artisans. Tax collectors siphon a portion of earnings from laborers to fund construction, defense, and lavish lifestyles. Large building projects, monuments, and palaces are funded not by the elite alone, but through the efforts and resources of the masses. Yet, when historians write about these achievements, the narrative centers on those who commissioned the work. The elite become the face of progress, while the laborers are remembered, if at all, as a faceless mass. Even as civilizations expanded their influence across regions, the social hierarchy remained rigid. Those born into privilege often had access to education, opportunity, and wealth. Those born without it were expected to serve, work, and remain compliant. Advancement for the masses was rare, and mobility almost non-existent. In many ways, the Golden Age depended on this imbalance. The more resources concentrated at the top, the more organized the system became. Centralized wealth enabled rulers to fund infrastructure, armies, and innovations that would define their era. Without this concentration of power, large-scale projects would have been impossible. But this centralization also created vulnerability. Power becomes a double-edged sword. The more wealth and influence are concentrated, the more the system depends on obedience and control. And the more glaring the inequality, the greater the potential tension between classes. The rich and powerful enjoyed luxury, fine foods, art, and leisure. The masses labored endlessly to sustain it. Yet, this imbalance was often justified through ideology. Religion, tradition, and cultural norms were used to maintain order. People were taught that their station was natural, that obedience was virtuous, and that challenging the system was both dangerous and sacrilegious. This moral framework, combined with necessity, kept civilizations running smoothly. But smooth operation often came at an invisible cost. Generations of laborers endured fatigue, risk, and scarcity so that the elite could thrive. Their labor-fueled empires, their taxes-funded grandeur, and their compliance maintained the illusion of stability. Even in moments of prosperity, tension simmered beneath the surface. The Golden Age shone brightly for some, but shadows stretched long over the rest, and those shadows were rarely recorded. Yet they influenced every aspect of daily life. The concentration of wealth-shaped education, career paths, marriage, and opportunity. It defined what was possible and what was out of reach. It created dependencies, ensuring that ordinary people remained tethered to the systems that profited the elite. Every innovation, every monument, every policy depended on this careful balance of labor, compliance, and reward. And the larger the civilization grew, the more fragile this balance became. Because extreme inequality can produce brilliance and collapse in equal measure. The Golden Age relied on obedience and exploitation, but it also relied on perception. The more successful the elite appeared, the more the masses internalized the system as natural. History remembers the triumphs of rulers and innovators, but it rarely accounts for the human cost of that triumph. The truth is that wealth was not a reflection of effort or contribution alone. It was a reflection of control, of hierarchy, of the careful orchestration of society by a select few. And while this concentration of wealth enabled incredible advancements, it also sowed the seeds of inequality, unrest, and eventual decline. Because civilizations built on extreme imbalance are inherently unstable. The more one group accumulates, the more another group bears the burden. And the heavier the burden, the greater the potential for cracks to appear beneath the golden surface. Understanding this dynamic is essential to understanding the real story of every golden age. Because every triumph has its cost. Every shining city hides shadows of inequality. And every system that enables brilliance also contains the seeds of its own challenges. The concentration of wealth and power is not just an economic story, it is the foundation upon which civilization builds, maintains, and sometimes undermines itself. In the next chapter, we'll examine how control and social order were enforced, and how harmony often came at the expense of freedom, revealing the subtle mechanisms that kept the Golden Age running for centuries. Chapter 5. Control disguised as harmony. Every Golden Age appears orderly, calm, and balanced on the surface. Cities thrive, trade flourishes, monuments rise, and society seems peaceful. But beneath that calm lies a carefully maintained structure of control. Harmony, as history presents it, was rarely spontaneous. It was orchestrated, planned, and often enforced in subtle, almost invisible ways. Leaders understood that order was fragile, that prosperity could unravel without compliance, that a single disruption could threaten the entire system. So control became as important as progress, and it was rarely overt. People were guided, nudged, and influenced to behave in ways that preserved stability. Laws, religion, and tradition were the tools of control. But so were culture, education, and social expectation. From childhood, people were taught their place. To obey authority, to respect hierarchy, to internalize the values that kept society functioning smoothly. Deviation was dangerous, not always punished violently, but often discouraged, shamed, or marginalized. Harmony depended on participation, on conformity, on the willingness of the majority to accept rules that benefited the few. Even the appearance of fairness was carefully maintained. Markets, festivals, and public ceremonies reinforced the idea that the system was just. Citizens saw rulers distributing rewards, judges enforcing laws, and temples blessing the social order. But these images masked the unequal distribution of power and wealth. Control was disguised as stability. Compliance was disguised as virtue. And people rarely realized how constrained their choices truly were. The elites created an environment in which everyone believed the system was natural. Religion reinforced obedience. Education reinforced hierarchy. Cultural norms reinforced roles. Even innovation was controlled. Scientific, artistic, and technological advances were encouraged, but only if they served the system, strengthened the elite, or improved efficiency. Anything threatening authority was limited, ignored, or punished. This is why Golden Ages often lasted generations without collapsing, despite inequality. Because the system didn't rely solely on force. It relied on consent, even if that consent was conditioned. And it relied on perception. As long as people believed the system was fair, it functioned smoothly. Harmony became both a reality and an illusion. People followed the rules, not always because they wanted to, but because social, economic, and cultural pressures left few alternatives. Even small acts of resistance were often contained, marginalized, or erased from memory. And the more complex the society became, the more sophisticated the methods of control. Bureaucracy, taxation, surveillance, and public rituals created a network of subtle influence. Everyone knew their role. Everyone felt their place. And few dared to challenge the system. At the same time, the system maintained order in ways that benefited the majority on the surface. Infrastructure, law enforcement, and public works created a sense of security. Food was produced and distributed. Cities were defended from external threats. Education and religious instruction provided moral guidance and practical knowledge. People felt included, productive, and part of something larger. But this inclusion came with boundaries. boundaries that define behavior, opportunity, and aspiration. Harmony existed because compliance was expected. Freedom existed only within certain limits. And those limits were invisible until tested. The Golden Age could appear seamless because it relied on a combination of achievement and subtle control. Progress dazzled, while social order masked constraint. People saw flourishing markets, impressive architecture, and powerful leaders, and assumed equality and fairness followed automatically. But harmony was never natural. It was carefully maintained, sustained by rules, expectations, and invisible pressures. And the more impressive the civilization appeared, the more essential this invisible control became. Understanding this dynamic changes how we view history. We no longer see golden ages as effortless triumphs. We see them as carefully balanced systems. Systems that required extraordinary effort, constant vigilance, and the compliance of ordinary people who rarely shared in the rewards. And as we peel back these layers, we realize that brilliance and control were intertwined. That what looks like harmony on the surface is often the product of unseen labor, social pressure, and carefully maintained inequality. The Golden Age dazzled the eye, inspired admiration, and advanced civilization. But it also shaped the lives, choices, and opportunities of countless people in ways history rarely acknowledges. It reminds us that every period of great achievement carries shadows. Shadows of control, shadows of sacrifice, shadows of lives lived quietly in the background. And once we see these shadows clearly, we begin to understand the true cost of a golden age, because harmony was never free. It was bought with labor, obedience, and the delicate orchestration of a complex society. And in the next chapter, we will explore how these golden ages eventually faced decline, and how the very structures that created brilliance also contained the seeds of instability that would challenge them for generations. Chapter 6. The Decline of the Golden Age. Every golden age, no matter how brilliant, carries within it the seeds of its own decline. The same systems that create monumental achievements, vast wealth, and powerful cities are fragile beneath the surface. Progress, inequality, and control, while effective for generations, cannot last forever without adaptation. Societies rise, flourish, and eventually face challenges that test the very foundations of their greatness. Economic systems strained under their own success. Trade networks expanded, but relied on stability that could be disrupted by famine, war, or mismanagement. The wealth of the elite grew, but so did the resentment of those whose labor sustained it. The gap between rich and poor widened, creating social tension that over time became increasingly difficult to contain. Even subtle control mechanisms, laws, traditions, social expectations began to strain under the weight of population growth and complexity. Institutions that once enforced order struggled to maintain compliance as expectations and burdens increased. Infrastructure that seemed permanent began to decay. Irrigation channels silted up, roads eroded, and buildings, while still impressive, required labor and resources that were increasingly difficult to provide. Environmental factors, too, played a role. Deforestation, soil depletion, and water shortages created pressures that no amount of governance could fully alleviate. Natural disasters, droughts, or crop failures were magnified by dense urban populations and reliance on centralized systems. Famine and scarcity tested loyalty, patience, and social cohesion. When hardship arrives, even the most obedient society begins to question its leaders, its laws, and its structure. And as we have seen in earlier chapters, the people who actually sustain progress are often invisible. Their dissatisfaction rarely appears in official records, but it exists in whispers, subtle acts of defiance, and reduced productivity. Over time, these pressures compound. The elite attempt to maintain control, but methods that worked in a smaller, simpler system begin to fail in a larger, more complex one. Corruption seeps into institutions. Inefficiency grows. The balance between wealth, control, and labor begins to tip. Rulers may continue to flaunt monuments, military power, or technological achievements, but these symbols cannot sustain society alone. Cultural cohesion may weaken as factions emerge. Religious, regional, or class divisions can deepen, creating unrest in ways previously unseen. And even innovation, once a driving force of progress, may slow or misalign with societal needs. The very systems designed to maintain harmony and enforce stability can become obstacles to survival. Control that once seemed invisible now feels oppressive. Obedience that once seemed natural now breeds resentment. And inequality that was tolerated in prosperous times becomes unbearable under stress. The Golden Age, celebrated for its brilliance, starts to reveal cracks. Trade falters, cities stagnate, leadership becomes contested, and in extreme cases, rebellion or collapse becomes possible. History provides countless examples of societies where this pattern repeats. Empires that once spanned continents shrink, sometimes disappearing entirely. Innovations are lost, knowledge forgotten, and monumental structures fall into ruin. But decline is rarely sudden. It is a process that unfolds over decades, sometimes centuries. A slow unraveling of the systems, relationships, and trust that once held the society together. And yet, even in decline, there are lessons to be learned. Golden Ages do not vanish because of a single failure, but because the balance between human labor, social order, wealth, and power becomes unsustainable. The very factors that produced brilliance, innovation, organization, and hierarchy also made the civilization vulnerable. And often, the ordinary people whose labor sustained the system for generations bear the greatest burden of decline. Famine, war, or societal collapse affects them first. The invisible workforce that once enabled greatness now faces consequences for problems they did not create. Meanwhile, the elite may attempt to preserve their wealth and power. But even their influence cannot halt the broader forces of decline. Natural limits, social tensions, and systemic vulnerabilities eventually prevail. Decline also reshapes history itself. As civilizations crumble, their achievements are reinterpreted, mythologized, or forgotten. Stories of triumph are preserved, but the human cost, the labor, the sacrifice, and the subtle tensions often disappear from memory. And this is why understanding decline is crucial. It shows us that no society, no matter how advanced, is immune to imbalance. It reveals the hidden vulnerabilities behind every golden age. It reminds us that progress, wealth, and control are double-edged swords. They create brilliance, but they also create fragility. And the fall of a golden age is rarely a mystery. It is the inevitable outcome of the very dynamics that created it. As we reflect on these patterns, we begin to see that the story of a golden age is not only about achievements. It is about the people who built it, the systems that maintained it, the power that guided it, and the vulnerabilities that, over time, allowed even the mightiest civilizations to face decline. Understanding this gives us a more authentic, complete view of history, because brilliance is always intertwined with fragility. Success is inseparable from cost, and every golden age, no matter how celebrated, carries the invisible weight of the systems and people that sustained it. In the next chapter, we'll explore the legacy and lessons of these ancient golden ages, what survives, what we can learn, and how their stories continue to influence us today. Chapter 7. Secrets lost to time. Even the most brilliant civilizations leave mysteries behind. Secrets that were once carefully guarded now lie buried beneath ruins, dust, and forgotten scrolls. Knowledge that shaped golden ages is often lost, sometimes deliberately, sometimes through the passage of time. Some discoveries vanish because they were considered too dangerous or powerful to share. Others are destroyed in wars, natural disasters, or societal collapse. The very systems that preserve knowledge can fail. Libraries crumble. Archives are burned. Or the skills required to use advanced tools and techniques disappear with their creators. Imagine a society that built immense cities, intricate machinery, and complex trade networks, but the blueprints, the methods, and the expertise vanish within a generation. What remains are fragments, artifacts, inscriptions, and monuments that hint at deeper truths. Historians, archaeologists, and scientists piece together these fragments, but gaps remain. We see the grandeur, but the how and why often elude us. Some technologies were astonishingly advanced for their time. Agricultural techniques that maximized yields. Engineering feats that defied gravity or spanned impossible distances. Medical practices that prolonged life and healed injuries. Yet, over centuries, many of these innovations were forgotten. And when knowledge disappears, societies are forced to rebuild from scratch, sometimes repeating past mistakes. Secrets lost to time are not just about technology. They include social systems, governance strategies, and cultural wisdom. Rules that maintained harmony, trade agreements that sustained peace. Philosophies that guided morality and justice. All gone or hidden behind layers of interpretation and myth. Sometimes, knowledge is deliberately suppressed. Rulers, priests, or elites may have restricted information to maintain power. Only a few were allowed to learn advanced mathematics, astronomy, or medicine. Access to such knowledge was a privilege and a control mechanism. And as time passes, even those privileged few vanish. The secrets die with them, yet traces remain, often cryptic and mysterious. Symbols on stones, carvings in temples, or subtle alignments of buildings can hint at lost understanding. These remnants challenge modern researchers to ask questions. How did they do it? What was their understanding of the world? What truths have been hidden or forgotten? And some secrets may never be fully recovered. The mystery is part of what makes studying Golden Ages so captivating. Every excavation, every translation, every discovery brings us closer, but also raises more questions. The lost knowledge reminds us that civilizations are fragile, not just physically, but intellectually. Ideas can vanish faster than monuments crumble. And as time moves forward, the gap between what was known and what survives only grows. Yet these lost secrets have inspired generations. They fuel curiosity, innovation, and imagination. Modern scientists and engineers often rediscover ideas that were once understood centuries ago. Inventions are recreated. Techniques are rediscovered. And through this rediscovery, we realize that the brilliance of the past continues to shape the present. Secrets lost to time also teach humility. No matter how advanced a civilization becomes, it is never immune to forgetting. Knowledge, like power, must be preserved, shared, and adapted, or it disappears. And in every artifact, ruin, and relic, we are reminded of what was achieved, what could be lost forever. Archaeology, anthropology, and history work together to uncover these hidden truths. They remind us that golden ages are as much about human ingenuity as they are about fragility. Every discovery, no matter how small, is a bridge across time. It connects us to the minds, hands, and hearts of people who lived thousands of years ago. Even if much has been lost, the echoes of their achievements continue to teach, inspire, and challenge us. And in the next chapter, we will explore how new powers rose from the shadows of decline, carrying forward some knowledge while forging new paths continuing. The story of humanity's relentless pursuit of brilliance. Chapter 8. Hidden Knowledge and Forbidden Technologies. Golden Ages were not only built on labor, wealth, and control. They were also built on knowledge so advanced, so precise, that it sometimes seems almost impossible, even by modern standards. Some of this knowledge was widely known among the elite, but other insights were deliberately hidden, restricted to small groups of scholars, priests, or engineers. These were the forbidden technologies, tools, methods, or understanding that could challenge power structures or disrupt society if widely shared. The more advanced a civilization became, the more secrets it held. Some knowledge was encoded in symbols, inscriptions, or ritualistic practices. Others were passed orally, known only to those who could read the signs or interpret the techniques. Engineering feats that built massive structures required not just labor, but highly sophisticated understanding of mathematics, physics, and material science. And yet, the methods for achieving these feats were rarely recorded for posterity. Weapons and military innovations were tightly guarded. Strategic knowledge ensured victory in battles, conquests, and defense, but it was never meant for the masses. Even medical techniques were sometimes hidden. Knowledge of herbs, surgeries, or treatments was restricted to those in the healer's circle. Knowledge itself became power, and power demanded secrecy. Some civilizations feared that if knowledge spread too widely, it could undermine rulers or disrupt social order. Forbidden technologies also extended to astronomy, navigation, and timekeeping. Calendars, celestial maps, and instruments for measuring the heavens were often only understood by select groups. These tools allowed civilizations to predict seasons, plan agriculture, and navigate vast territories. But without secrecy, the advantage could be lost. Some innovations were lost entirely. Machines, devices, or techniques that may have been revolutionary vanished because they were too complex to reproduce, or because those who understood them died without passing on their knowledge. Libraries that held the instructions for building, medicine, and metallurgy were burned in wars, invasions, or internal purges, and sometimes knowledge was deliberately destroyed. Rulers or elites would erase innovations they feared could empower rivals or disrupt societal hierarchy. The result was that many civilizations reached technological heights and then regressed, leaving behind only monuments and fragments of understanding. Even today, researchers uncover mysteries that hint at this hidden knowledge. Archaeological digs reveal tools with precision that seems impossible for their era. Structures aligned perfectly with astronomical events, despite lacking modern equipment. Metallurgy, ceramics, and glassmaking techniques sometimes surpass what is expected for their time period. These are the clues of forbidden technology's advanced knowledge that existed, but was intentionally veiled, forgotten, or lost. Some scholars speculate that this hidden knowledge also included ideas about energy, motion, or mechanics that modern science is only beginning to explore. And it challenges our assumptions about what ancient civilizations were capable of. The forbidden knowledge also serves as a warning. Power, when tied to secrecy, can both create brilliance and suppress progress. Societies that hoard information often preserve dominance for a few generations, but the cost is stagnation for the majority. Meanwhile, other civilizations that shared knowledge more openly sometimes advanced faster, even if they had fewer resources or less labor. This dynamic between secrecy and sharing, power and progress is a pattern we see repeated across history. Hidden knowledge reminds us that brilliance is not always visible. It may be encoded in symbols, rituals, or forgotten manuscripts. It may lie buried beneath ruins, submerged in rivers, or locked away in forgotten vaults. And sometimes, rediscovering it is a process of combining archaeology, linguistics, chemistry, and intuition. The fascination with hidden knowledge and forbidden technologies is not just about the past. It shapes our curiosity, inspires innovation, and reminds us of human potential. It shows us that there is always more to learn, always deeper layers of understanding waiting to be uncovered. And it teaches a crucial lesson. Knowledge, when hoarded, can protect power, but when lost, it deprives humanity of progress. In the next chapter, we will explore how new powers rose from the shadows of these lost golden ages, using some of this hidden knowledge to forge their own empires, changing the course of history forever. Chapter 9. The Rise of New Powers. Every decline creates a vacuum. When a golden age fades, the systems that once maintained wealth, control, and innovation weaken. Old hierarchies crumble, cities lose their influence, and empires fracture. And in that vacuum, new powers emerge. These are the civilizations, kingdoms, and cultures that seize opportunity, adapt, and build anew. The rise of new powers is rarely sudden. It is a process of observation, adaptation, and learning from the past. Leaders study the remnants of previous empires. Their successes, their failures, their hidden knowledge. They replicate what works. They avoid what led to collapse. Sometimes they inherit technologies and techniques long forgotten by the majority. Knowledge once forbidden becomes a foundation for growth. Secret methods of agriculture, engineering, metallurgy, or governance can give new powers a strategic advantage. Trade routes abandoned by fading civilizations are seized. Resources once centralized under declining elites are redistributed. And the people who endured hardship under old systems often provide the labor and innovation for new societies. The rise of new powers is also cultural. Languages, religions, and traditions evolve, blending remnants of the past with fresh ideas. New art, architecture, and literature emerge, often inspired by the monuments and innovations of the previous era. Even the myths and legends of golden ages are repurposed to inspire loyalty, identity, and purpose. Yet, this rise is not without conflict. Emerging powers face resistance from remnants of the old order, rival factions, or competing civilizations. Wars, diplomacy, and alliances determine who succeeds and who fails. The new powers often adopt stricter systems of control, learned from the failures of previous societies. They implement hierarchies, regulations, and methods of governance to stabilize their realms. But unlike their predecessors, they have the advantage of hindsight. They know which mistakes to avoid, which structures to reinforce, and which innovations, hidden or forgotten, to revive for progress. Some new powers thrive because they combine lessons from history with adaptability. They balance control and freedom, wealth and fairness, innovation and sustainability. Others falter, repeating the errors of their predecessors. Inequality, mismanagement, and rigidity can still lead to stagnation or decline. The rise of new powers is often accelerated by migration and cultural blending. People fleeing the decline of old civilizations bring skills, ideas, and knowledge. These migrants often form the backbone of the new society, contributing labor, expertise, and cultural insight. New powers may establish cities in locations previously overlooked, taking advantage of fertile land, trade routes, or strategic positioning. They reorganize governance, sometimes creating more centralized states, sometimes forming federations or alliances. The interplay of geography, knowledge, and human ambition defines which powers flourish. Some of the most remarkable civilizations of history were born in the shadows of older golden ages. They inherited fragments of the past technologies, philosophies, and institutions adapted them in ways that transformed the world. The rise of new powers also demonstrates resilience. Even when knowledge is lost, when inequality persists, when control systems collapse, human societies find ways to rebuild. They innovate, they adapt, they reimagine what is possible. And through this process, they lay the foundation for the next golden age. It is a cycle of brilliance and fragility. Rise, peak, decline, and rebirth. Every era carries lessons from the past, opportunities for innovation, and the potential for both greatness and failure. This chapter reminds us that history is not linear, is dynamic, cyclical, and interconnected. No civilization exists in isolation. Each is influenced by those that came before and will influence those that follow. New powers rise not only through conquest or dominance, but through insight, adaptation, and the willingness to learn from hidden knowledge and the mistakes of the past. And sometimes, these new powers surpass the achievements of earlier civilizations. They combine innovation with lessons learned. They balance progress with social structure. And they wield knowledge both visible and hidden to shape their world. Yet, even as new powers rise, the cycle continues. Inequality, control, and human limitations remain challenges. Brilliance is always accompanied by fragility. Power is always accompanied by responsibility. And the lessons of past golden ages serve as both inspiration and warning. The rise of new powers teaches us that history is never lost. Knowledge, ideas, and human ingenuity persist, sometimes dormant, sometimes forgotten, until a new generation awakens them. And as we move to the final chapter, we will examine the lasting legacy of all these civilizations, the lessons they offer, and how their brilliance and fragility continue to influence our modern world. Chapter 10. Legacy and Lessons. Even as civilizations rise and fall, their influence endures. Golden ages, decline, hidden knowledge, and the rise of new powers all leave a lasting imprint on humanity. Monuments, technologies, and artifacts survive as tangible proof of human ambition and creativity. But the deeper legacy is not always visible. It is in ideas, lessons, and patterns that repeat through time. We learn how progress can elevate society, but also how inequality, rigid control, and imbalance can threaten it. We see that brilliance requires labor, ingenuity, and sacrifice, that the people who contribute most often remain unseen. History teaches us that wealth, power, and knowledge are intertwined. Those who control knowledge often control societies. But hoarding knowledge can also limit progress. Conversely, sharing knowledge can fuel innovation, advancement, and resilience. Civilizations rise and fall, but lessons persist. We see how hidden knowledge or forgotten technologies can give rise to new powers. We see how the collapse of one civilization creates opportunities for another. We see the delicate balance between innovation and stability, freedom and control, wealth and fairness. Legacy is also about human stories. Laborers, artisans, scholars, and ordinary citizens shaped every achievement. Yet history often remembers only rulers and elites. Recognizing their contributions gives us a more complete understanding of the past. Golden ages were brilliant, but fragile. They dazzled, inspired, and advanced humanity, but they also contained seeds of inequality, unrest, and decline. By studying these patterns, we gain insight into our present and guidance for our future. We learn that progress without equity is unstable. Power without responsibility is dangerous. Innovation without preservation is fleeting, and harmony without adaptability is fragile. Civilizations offer us both inspiration and caution. They remind us to admire achievement while honoring human cost, to value knowledge while ensuring it is preserved and shared, to celebrate brilliance while remaining vigilant against fragility. Even in decline, civilizations leave lessons that shape subsequent generations. Ideas persist. Techniques are rediscovered. Stories are retold. And human ingenuity continues to evolve, informed by the past. Legacy is not only what survives in stone or text, it is the influence these civilizations have on ideas, culture, governance, and society. It is the lessons learned from their triumphs and failures. It is the understanding that brilliance requires balance, effort, and foresight. And it is the knowledge that every golden age, no matter how magnificent, is temporary unless nurtured, respected, and adapted. As we reflect on history, we see a continuous cycle: rise, brilliance, hidden knowledge, decline, new powers, and lasting legacy. This cycle is a testament to human potential. It reminds us that achievement is possible, but it is never effortless. Progress is attainable, but it carries responsibilities. And knowledge, when respected and shared, can shape societies for generations. The ultimate lesson of these ancient golden ages is that human civilization is a story of balance. Balance between ambition and humility, between power and fairness, between knowledge and wisdom, between labor and leadership. When we honor these lessons, we honor the civilizations themselves, these people who made them possible. History is alive. Its stories endure. And by studying them, we gain insight not only into the past, but into the choices we make today, the future we create tomorrow. If this journey through the rise, brilliance, hidden knowledge, and lasting legacy of ancient civilizations fascinated you, hit subscribe to join our community. Like this video if you want more deep dives. into history and science and comment below which golden age or hidden story surprised you the most. Your support helps us uncover more untold stories and bring history to life in ways you've never seen before.